Welcome to this new auto news video for Wednesday, June 10th, 2026. On the agenda today, we'll talk about BMW, which claims to have solved the biggest problem with hydrogen cars. We'll talk about a European battery manufacturer that simply lied about one of the revolutionary battery technologies it had presented, about BYD, which has just unveiled very attractive prices for its new Dolphin G, which, remember, is the only plug-in hybrid city car on the European market. We'll discuss Alfa Romeo, which is already discontinuing one of its latest models. Right before all that, I'm adding a little bonus news that I found particularly interesting, coming from Lotus. The head of the Lotus brand officially and publicly stated, and it's true that it sounds pretty crazy given what he said. I quote, "Almost all our cars are mediocre." He sharply criticized Lotus's recent direction, saying a true Lotus shouldn't weigh over 1,800 kilos. The problem is that with the arrival of electric cars and their big batteries, Lotus now has several models in its lineup that aren't sporty at all and weigh over 2.5 tons. He publicly admitted that Lotus has departed from its historic philosophy focused on lightness and driving sensations. At the same conference, he reminded everyone that giving an electric car 1,000 horsepower doesn't make it sporty or dynamic, especially if it weighs 2.5 tons. These are very critical remarks that have the merit of being clear-sighted, but they are still relatively rare statements in the modern automotive industry. We're going to tackle the topics that were on the agenda for this video. I hope you'll find them interesting. If you do, as always, I'm counting on you to show it by leaving a like, subscribing for future videos, boosting this one if the option appears for you, and of course by leaving a comment where you share your thoughts on today's news. For years, the hydrogen car seemed doomed to remain a niche technology. Not because it didn't work, but because it was extremely expensive. Until now, for hydrogen cars, manufacturers had to develop specific cars with specific platforms, and sometimes even dedicated production lines in their factories. This resulted in cars that were very expensive to produce, which manufacturers had to sell at very high prices just to break even. Well, that's going to change thanks to BMW, who announced today a new hydrogen vehicle technology. This new technology solves several major problems with hydrogen cars and should finally make it possible to sell them at more reasonable prices. The German brand has just unveiled its new system called hydrogen flat storage. It's a new method of storing compressed hydrogen inside the vehicle, which has many advantages. First of all, instead of having to create a platform or chassis specifically for hydrogen vehicles, BMW has managed to design a hydrogen tank on board the vehicle. It's compact and modular enough to take up exactly the same space as the batteries in the electric versions of its different models. In other words, where an electric version carries its battery, the hydrogen version now houses its new storage system. So, BMW doesn't need to design a 100% dedicated hydrogen platform, which will allow it to save a lot on development and production costs, since its future hydrogen vehicles, like the X5 for example, can all be assembled on the same production lines. What I mean by that is that a production line for the X5 will be able to produce internal combustion versions, hybrid versions, fully electric versions, or hydrogen versions. Big savings for BMW that should ultimately result in lower prices at dealerships. But that's far from being the only advantage of this technology. The other advantage, still using the X5 as an example, is that in its hydrogen version, BMW uses exactly the same motor as in the fully electric versions. The only thing that will change between these two versions is the way electricity is produced. The fully electric versions will be recharged at traditional charging stations, whereas in the hydrogen version, electricity will be produced on board the vehicle, thanks to the hydrogen stored in the different cells of the vehicle. The big difference compared to a traditional tank is that here we have 7 small tanks, all made from ultra-resistant materials, especially carbon composites. These are small, thin, flat tubes that can easily be placed in the space normally reserved for the batteries in the fully electric versions. Each of these tubes contains 1 kilogram of hydrogen. All these tubes are connected to each other and are controlled by a simple valve that allows you to open the tank more or less. In these hydrogen versions, BMW claims about 620 kilometers of range. With a big advantage, unlike electric cars, which always require several dozen minutes to recharge, refueling a hydrogen vehicle takes about the same amount of time as filling up an internal combustion car. It's very fast, just a few minutes. The other advantage compared to traditional systems is that these 7 small tanks, unlike older hydrogen technologies, eliminate the need to store a huge tank under the vehicle. This helps preserve the space inside the vehicle and also keeps the available space in the trunk. Unless there is a change of plans, the first mass-produced BMW hydrogen models equipped with this new technology will arrive on the market at the beginning of 2028. If BMW succeeds in its gamble, it will be a huge step forward. For the hydrogen car, the only challenge that will remain is the hydrogen distribution network, which for now in Europe has been somewhat set aside in favor of expanding the electric charging station network. Unfortunately, in the automotive industry, not all the promises made by manufacturers and industrialists are always true. And we've just had a rather interesting case with a European battery company that simply lied. Remember, a few months ago in a video we talked about Donut Lab, a Finnish company, so European, that claimed to have made a historic breakthrough in industrialization of semi-solid batteries, which seemed extremely surprising at the time, since the only ones currently able to enter production of semi-solid batteries are the Chinese, who are actually going to do it for the first time through the MG brand, which will launch the MG4 Urban in Europe in a few months, with a semi-solid battery, the first on the European market. It's indeed very surprising to see a European company beat the big Chinese battery manufacturers to the punch. And a study conducted by battery experts from the Finnish State Technical Research Center explains that if it was surprising, it's probably because everything was false. And apparently everything is false, like everything from A to Z. First of all, the actual battery technology is nothing like what Donut Lab claimed, which talked about semi-solid sodium batteries. In reality, it would be a traditional lithium-ion battery. Very efficient, of course, but nothing specifically extremely advanced. Secondly, the performance announced by Donut Lab would not be verified at all in reality, since Donut Lab talked about an energy density of 400 Wh per kilo, whereas in reality, it's more like under 300. And even the development of the battery would be a big lie, because apparently, Donut Lab hasn't developed anything at all. It would be a battery that was entirely outsourced to a small Finnish company that has absolutely nothing in common with the Chinese industrial giants. A big lie that still has several consequences. The first is that Donut Lab had still raised $25 million from a whole bunch of investors who firmly believed in the technology proposed by Donut Lab, whose value dropped by about 20 after the publication of this investigation. Secondly, the brands that were supposed to work with them, like the motorcycle brand Verge, for example, whose name in the end might not have been so meaningless after all, which was supposed to be the first motorcycle equipped with these famous semi-solid batteries, well, won't have any semi-solid batteries. And thirdly, it takes away any hope of seeing a European champion of semi-solid batteries emerge faster than Chinese companies, which is really a shame for our industry. After all the promises, back to reality. Because while Donald Trump is still trying to convince people about his technology, BYD has just unveiled a car that you can actually buy at a really low price. While European brands still refuse to produce plug-in hybrid city cars, BYD, the famous Chinese brand, is actually launching the first plug-in hybrid city car on the European market. This is the BYD Dolphin G. It's equipped with BYD's famous DMH technology, which we've talked about many times. This allows you to have both a plug-in hybrid vehicle and a range extender vehicle, with the same car and the same engine. Where BYD really stands out is that even on the entry-level versions, the all-electric range will be 40 kilometers, which should cover the vast majority of daily trips, like commuting to work. There will be higher versions that will even offer 105 kilometers of all-electric range, between the all-electric range and the gasoline range, since it will, of course, have a gasoline engine. With the 42-liter tank, the Dolphin claims a combined range of 1,040 kilometers. This makes it extremely versatile, since it can handle all your daily city trips in full electric mode. And it also allows you to take long trips, like going on vacation, without any problem. The crazy thing is, the power is quite high for a small city car. It's almost like a GTI, actually. The entry-level versions claim a combined 176 horsepower and 212 on the higher-end models, with 0 to 100 km/h announced in 8.3 seconds. The best part is the price, since the Dolphin G starts at €23,900 in its active version. This version does have a small peculiarity, since on this one, charging is limited to 3.3 kilowatts in alternating current, which means you have to charge your car for 45 minutes to go from 15 to 100% battery, which probably won't be a big problem if the car stays at home, plugged in all night. Roughly speaking, it's €3,000 to €4,000 more expensive than an electric Twingo, without the hassles that come with it, and with much better versatility. Let me remind everyone who's obsessed with fully electric cars that, on a daily basis, you can drive fully electric without any problem. And in the end, you don't have much less range than a Twingo, while still being able to drive several hundred kilometers in a row on the weekend. For your vacation trips, it doesn't matter, without needing a second vehicle alongside. And that's actually pretty cool. On one side, we have BYD, launching a new car to attract new customers. And on the other side, we have Alfa Romeo, which is already getting ready to move on from the Tonale, even though it's not old in the lineup and has just been restyled. Its production will end in November 2027. So it's not really for commercial reasons, because the Tonale is actually one of the models that sells pretty well at Alfa Romeo. It's just that it will be replaced in the lineup by a new C-segment SUV model, which will be based on the new ST platform, the One. And rather than having duplicates in its lineup, Alfa Romeo prefers to discontinue the Tonale to make room for the new generations. By the way, I'll add a little piece of information about the Tonale that might interest you. Tonale models with the blue HDI 1.5-liter hybrid engine, 160 horsepower, are being recalled due to the known issue of bent connecting rods, which we discussed recently when other Stellantis brands were affected. A mandatory recall for Stellantis, since it presents a safety risk, because in the most extreme cases, this infamous bent connecting rod could cause a serious enough defect that could even lead to the vehicle catching fire. That's it. We've covered today's news. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, as usual, I count on you to show it by leaving a like, subscribing for the next videos, and possibly supporting through the join button below. See you tomorrow for the next video. Bye.